All right, let's dive right in. We are about to unpack the science behind one of the weirdest questions you're going to hear all day. It all starts right here. Why in the world do flies seem to avoid a cow that's painted to look like a zebra?
I know. It sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, doesn't it? But believe it or not, a team of researchers in Japan took this question very seriously. They actually set out to discover exactly what happens when you take a regular old cow and give it a zebra-striped makeover.
And the answer? Well, it's just as bizarre as the question itself. The flies, they actually stay away. Seriously. And this isn't just some random coincidence. Nope, it's the result of a really brilliant experiment that, believe it or not, helps solve a huge, long-standing evolutionary mystery. So to really get how we got to this point, we've got to go back to the source, the zebra. So you might be wondering, where did an idea like this even come from? I mean, who thinks to paint a cow like a zebra? Well, it all goes back to one of nature's most famous and most puzzling designs.
You know, for literally centuries, scientists have been arguing about why zebras have stripes. The theories were, well, they were all over the map. Maybe it was for thermoregulation, to stay cool, or maybe to confuse predators like lions during a chase. Some even thought it was a social thing to help zebras recognize each other. But here's the thing, when they actually tested these ideas, none of them really held up. There just wasn't any solid proof.
But amidst all those unproven ideas, one observation kept popping up again and again from people in the field. Zebras just don't seem to get bothered by biting flies nearly as much as other animals living right alongside them. And you gotta understand, these flies are a huge problem for livestock all over the world. So that one little observation led researchers to a really simple but testable idea. What if the stripes themselves are the reason? And that, right there, brings us to the experiment. Because how on earth do you prove that it's just the stripes and not something else entirely about zebras that's keeping the flies at bay? This is like a classic problem in science, right? Separating correlation from causation. Sure, zebras have stripes, and zebras have fewer flies. But does one cause the other? It could be anything. Maybe it's their smell, or their body temperature, or how they move. To really figure it out, you have to control for every single one of those variables, except for one, the pattern. Okay, and this is where the setup gets super clever. They used cows. Why? Because that keeps things like smell and temperature and behavior basically identical across the board. So they had 3 groups. Group 1 was the control, just plain, unpainted black cows. Group 2 got painted completely white to see if just being a lighter color made any difference. And then Group 3, well, they got the full zebra treatment. So now, with everything else being the same, the only real difference left to test was the pattern itself. So, this all sets up the big question, right? With smell, temperature, and movement all the same, could a simple pattern, just some paint, really be enough to stop the flies? The stage was totally set to get a clear answer. All right, let's get to the results. And let me tell you, they were not subtle at all. The data told a really, really clear story. The results were just stunning. So the researchers literally counted every single time a biting fly landed on a cow in each of the groups. And the regular black cows and the all-white cows, yeah, they were absolutely swarmed with flies. But the striped cows, they saw a huge, massive drop in landings. The effect wasn't just a little bit noticeable, it was dramatic. We're talking statistically significant big time. And this was the absolute key finding. Just painting the cows white? It did next to nothing. The flies pretty much landed on them just as much. It was only that specific, high-contrast, zebra-like pattern that made the big difference. This proved it had nothing to do with just being bright or being a different color. It was all about the pattern. Okay, so we know the stripes work. That's settled. But the next question is, why? Why do they work? And this is where we dive into the really fascinating world of how insects actually see. So the core idea here is something scientists call information failure. Now, this isn't about the stripes repelling the fly or making the cow invisible. The fly can see the cow just fine. The problem is that the stripes completely scramble the visual data its tiny brain needs to actually coordinate a successful landing. Let's break down exactly how this works. First off, the stripes break up the solid, continuous outline of the animal's body. For a fly, that solid shape is like a giant land here sign. Second, the stripes mess with all the visual cues flies use, like polarized light and contrast. And finally, as the fly gets super close for the landing, the pattern makes it almost impossible for it to judge its own speed and distance. So the fly sees the target, but its brain just can't process the final approach. It basically fails to. Now, this whole discovery is so much bigger than just cows and flies. This really points towards a whole new way of thinking about everything from pest control to engineering design. So on one level, a small-scale level, this study gives us really strong evidence that zebra stripes are a functional adaptation. They're basically a brilliant piece of evolutionary engineering designed for visual misdirection. But then, on the bigger, macro level, this opens the door to a whole new way of handling pest control in farming, one that doesn't have to rely on chemicals, but instead could use simple patterns to protect animals. And hey, this isn't just a theory anymore. This research is already being turned into simple, practical stuff. We're already seeing companies making things like striped blankets for cattle and horses. They're taking this exact principle and using it to protect animals in a way that's safe, totally chemical-free, and way better for the environment. And really, this is the powerful idea we're left with. You have an experiment that started with a question that sounds kind of silly, right? Painting stripes on a cow. But it ends up revealing this profound truth. It shows us that the designs we see in nature, created by evolution, they aren't just random or for decoration. They are highly, highly optimized pieces of engineering. And if we just pay attention, we can find these incredibly elegant solutions to our own problems, not by using more force or more chemicals, but by using smarter, nature-inspired design.